I've been coached ahead of time to not say how excited I am, but I have to be honest, I'm really freaking excited. For two reasons. One, because we came here last year and I never thought we'd be hosting something at HumanX, which is really exciting. But two, because I get to work and talk to two of the people who made a highlight for my career personally, but I think hopefully a highlight for you all as well, with the first ever AI Super Bowl ad with all sorts of auxiliary content. And so I was gonna ask how many of you had seen the Svedka Super Bowl ad, but you've all seen it now. And so what we're really gonna deconstruct is how that was made. And from the very sexy topics of working through procurement all the way to building workflow to the future of creativity. And so I'll start it off, Drew, with you. And Drew actually was responsible for one of the great injuries of my life because he called me to ask if we would do a Super Bowl ad. And I grew up in the advertising world and never thought I'd get to do a Super Bowl ad when we moved over to technology. And so I jumped out of my chair, and this is a true story, I threw on my back. So I hold you directly responsible, but I'm very curious. Obviously working through large organizations like Sazerac, making decisions like taking the leap into something as controversial as AI is a pretty significant decision. And as Amy touched on, there are certainly haters in the world who are not as excited about AI. There are people who are incredibly excited about it. But I know from working with procurement teams every single day that typically that's a difficult process from the strategic level all the way down, especially in a multi-layered organization. And so I wanted to ask you, at what point did AI shift from, wow, this is a really interesting idea, to something that you were willing to essentially build an entire brand around? And what did that process look like internally as you navigated it from a strategic perspective, from a decision-making perspective, and eventually taking that leap?
Yeah, well, hi everybody. First of all, I'm sorry about your back. I didn't know that.
No, you'll get it.
I feel like you're walking pretty well right now.
You'll get it.
So for us, and Amy kind of alluded to this, using AI for our Svedbot was a bit of a foregone conclusion. I mean, if you're going to reinvent an avant-garde robot in 2025, then it would be ridiculous not to consider the relevancy of AI today. And really when it came to the Super Bowl spot, because we did prototype a little bit in the fall, we prototyped everything with 3 spots that we used AI for. For the Super Bowl specifically, we decided to make our spot more about AI because our PR team, our EARN team is part of every conversation, really told us, well, you know, we think that people would find this relevant. We think that this would be talk-worthy. We think that the earned impressions could be really huge with this. And, you know, our sticky asset, our robot, you know, she doesn't have a voice yet. We haven't decided if we're going to give her one. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. But she never had one. We haven't had time to make one yet. And so that kind of means that we weren't going to have a celebrity for the Super Bowl. All right, and as a celebrity, there's a couple of plays for the Super Bowl that help you stand out, break through. So that meant that AI could serve as our celebrity. So really, when we realized that we could get considerable earn from it, we were all in. And so, you know, we marched as fast as we could towards the finish line. So amazing.
And as you think about it, obviously you have an internal studio and creative team. You've been a part of, I assume, endless productions and traditional productions as well. And so as you stepped into this process with AI, what were the things that were drastically different? What were you surprised by? Like, I assume you had expectations coming in, and what was the same, what was different, both in terms of the process of bringing it to life, but also very curious in terms of the response. How did you guys think about that, and what was surprising there?
Yeah, so I've only been doing this advertising thing for about 3 years. And I've gotten feedback that I overshare. But PJ talks a little bit about there's never been a smaller gap between, the CMO and the year one marketing professional. And I think we just saw a beautiful example of why that's true. That commercial that we looked at with insurance earlier was a phenomenal example. So for me, the process itself was breaking and being very completely different. We rehearsed that in the fall. We knew how different the process would be. But for us, the thing that was surprising is even after rehearsing it, the strategy and the creative and the production happening simultaneously. We talked a little bit earlier about, Amy and PJ talked about the chaos that causes, okay? So that means that you have to have a very tight team and you have to have a lot of trust in order to move fluidly through that chaos, because you're making decisions constantly, so many decisions, because when you can control everything, theoretically anything is an option. So that harkens back to, I think, really being super clear about about where you're headed, where your intent is. So clarity of intent becomes incredibly important, and I think that with the previous process, you could rely a little bit on the linearness of that process to guide you through it. But when it's all happening at once, then the most important thing is, I think, your level of discernment and your ability to make the right choices. And I know that I'm rambling, so I'll stop rambling. But I mean, everything is different now. And so I would encourage everybody in this room to just dive in and start to learn what those things are, because you got to prototype it and learn it before you get to the big time. And it's all different now. So let's go.
Absolutely, and Drew is very familiar with the decision-making process because, as Amy rightly pointed out, things in AI theoretically are never locked, right? Like you can change anything at any time. I would like to push back on that slightly because we do have to lock sometimes. So we do have to make some decisions occasionally. But I do think it's really interesting, and the process was fascinating because we were texting you at like 2 a.m, like, hey, new cut, what do you think? And iterating all the time. And so, as we start to talk a little bit about the underlying infrastructure that allowed this to happen, I do want to quickly show kind of a video behind the scenes of some of these things.
Yep, please.
And then Yoland kind of directing to you as well. But this is kind of a fun behind the scenes.
This is the story of how an icon from 2010 became the first AI-made Super Bowl ad ever. And hold on, because this isn't a story about how technology replaced humans. It's about how a new technology replaced an old one. It all started with paper, pencil, and good old industrial design to modernize our original fembot and give her a partner too. While some of us trained AI models on the new characters, others trained another AI to build the world we created. In the meantime, a third group focused on possible stories we could tell. It was just a matter of days until we had animated prototypes for all the scripts we liked. Our favorite? A simple story powered by a very human trick, asking TikTok to create the choreography our fembot would dance for the largest audience in America. While the world concocted her dance moves, we dove into every little detail of every little scene. We even had to develop new workflows to allow us to make progressive changes instead of restarting generations every time someone had another idea. No prompting and praying here. In the first 10 seconds alone, our 2 robots performed 12 separate actions, a level of choreography way above any AI production. But hey, it's the Super Bowl. No shortcuts here. At the end of the day, craft is passion, a very human passion, manifested every day by our animators, editors, special effects professionals, designers, colorists, musicians, and writers. And since the systems were so fast to bring their ideas to life, they could keep thinking of new ideas while the film was already being made. By the time our main scenes were ready, We had the winning dance from TikTok waiting for us. We just had to plug it into our workflow. And in minutes, the fembot had all her moves done. We just needed one more pass to clean the last few hallucinations, and we were done. The Super Bowl had its first commercial produced with AI.
So at this point, I wanted to show that because I think one of the things that's really interesting about this process is that it's really not just a prompt, pray, and move to the next. There is this element of workflows that is absolutely essential to how we do this and how we do this scalably, right? And so, Yoland, I wanted to ask you, obviously as the CEO and founder of ComfyUI, you have some thoughts on workflows and where they fit in. And so, with the Sazerac and the Svedka team, we built scalable workflows. Those are now being deployed into technology that you all can use. But as you think about where workflows fit into the AI ecosystem and the creative ecosystem, how do you think about where they are now and where they're headed?
First of all, my name is Yoland. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Comfy. Thank you, Johnny, for inviting me to here today. And thank you, Drew, for working with Silverside and being able to make this come true. It was actually pretty shocking and very honored for the rest of the team to witness the Super Bowl ad. And we're all just, a bunch of tech nerds sitting in front of Super Bowl and not knowing any of the rules, and waiting for the ads to come online. And in that case scenario, thank you for the introduction to the football game itself. I would like to kind of first start by giving a quick context in terms of what Comfy is. As you guys seen in the video just now, Comfy is this workflow-based system that allows you to connect different components together. And many of you might ask, why do you need to do that? At the core, what Comfy enables you is to get the maximum level of control with AI. A lot of times, the folks in this room are all familiar with a system where you just type a text prompt or upload some images, in the end, hoping the AI will do the right thing. But pretty much everyone here probably experienced the feeling of, well, this is close enough, but I just want to change one more thing, and everything changed. And you try again, and it never gets there. Comfy is basically the opposite type of system that enables this type of workflow for you to combine things together and get that fine-grained level of control and hence the quality. To answer Johnny's question over here, I think at the core, Comfy as a workflow system comes in when you are ready to take experimentation into production. I think a lot of times people tend to get started with inspirations by simple based prompting and get some ideas, but Comfy in the end comes in when people are ready to take those pipelines into a high quality production environment. And this is the world we're seeing right now, that essentially you can go from a simple experimentation to production in an incredibly fast-paced mechanism. Historically, a lot of the companies we've seen work on these commercials or marketing campaign for half a year. And now that timeline has been reduced to less than 1 month. And in that world, you also, within that 1 month, can produce a lot of type of content in you. And another thing that's very exciting and interesting about a workflow-based system is that it allows you to have this very human-in-the-loop approach. In the end, you're not playing with a slot machine where something comes out and you basically have to use that. And in the workflow environment, you have every bit of control in here. So I think that is kind of where Comfy really fits in the world of AI for marketing campaigns.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we've seen it firsthand. We saw it in the video, and it is absolutely true, and it scales productions really effectively. And I think one of the things that we hear a lot, and I know I hear this oftentimes around the dining room table because I come from a family of artists, is this question about automating the creative process and what that means. And I think that sometimes people hear workflows and they say, are you automating something away that's traditionally human? And so when you think about this idea of workflows that allow scalability, where do you see the intersection between that and human creativity? How do those two things work together?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's often an area where we get asked a lot as well. I think at the core, one thing right now, workflows and AI is enable you to do is not to take away the creativity, because at the end of the day, I don't think anyone cares to watch a simple prompt-based film or production or advertisement campaign in the end. I think this Svedka film or advertisement itself is a living proof that there's a huge amount of human creativity that's involved in here. What you saw is the final production, but behind the scene there must have been a huge amount of iteration, people jamming about ideas, and that human in the loop approach is at the core why a flow-based solution matters, because at the end of the day, you as the creator have to inject your taste and opinion. You can't just rely on ChatGPT to kind of give you the answer of that taste. The dimensionality of these tastes is incredibly high, where you can go from, on one hand, a realism type of approach to animated shorts and everything in the middle as well. So I think at the core, these type of AI solution does not take away the creativity nature. That being said, I do think I definitely agree with the double tap on PJ's view from earlier, where now what AI is able to do is reduce the size of the team to fairly small, because you all of a sudden no longer need as huge of a team to do a lot of the cumbersome work in the process. This we have seen over and over again, where Comfy is able to take away a lot of very tedious element of work. One example I give is, for example, for animation itself, there's this process called kind of when you're doing the keyframe and afterwards doing the coloring itself. Now with a workflow-based solution, you can completely automate that process, and that's a process where artists used to hate a lot. And all of a sudden, that process just reduced the size of the team by a decent margin, along with many others. And in that world, it basically enables people to create a lot more content and be a lot more personable when it comes to content creation and putting it on every single platform. And I think that's the nature of kind of creativity when it plays into the world of AI.
I 100% agree, and I also think that's a great point, where because of kind of what you and Amy have talked about, Drew, this idea of everything can change all the time, that smaller team, that more efficient unit, and then more projects, instead of saying, okay, great, we got rid of everyone else, it's now we can do so much more and appeal to so many more consumers in ways that hadn't previously been possible. Is hugely empowered by both the small team and the workflows that allow it to happen. And so as we kind of wrap up, I wanted to quickly end on a question for both of you, which is, we obviously have a company directly involved in the creation of content and a technology platform. And so as we look ahead to the future, how do we think this is going to evolve the creative process, both in terms of creativity itself and what that allows, but also execution? I would also ask at the end of your question, or at the end of your answer, if you can give just one piece of advice for anyone on the brand side as well as the technology side who is interested in stepping into this world, what you would encourage them to look into or do or not do. So Drew, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so that's such a big question, and I could think and I'd discuss for a long time, but I know we don't have a long time. I think that it's so incredibly important for brands today to decide and lock what they stand for, to make that simple, straightforward, to make sure everybody on the team knows, because we don't want to spend all of our time working on one piece. We want to take that and we want to work on the expression of that brand, as the personification of a business across as many touch points as we can, so that we can create an authentic connection with our consumers. And so I think that what the advice that I would give would be to really decide what you stand for and make sure that you trust the people that you're working with to go and find that, because when you can have an insight on a Friday and then Tuesday you can put a piece of content up, how are you going to send that through the typical alignment and approval process? If your bottleneck changes, and really what you need to do is you need to have a team that really trusts and collaborates at the speed of AI, because that's the only thing that's holding you back.
Absolutely. On my end, I definitely think on where we see the world of storytelling going towards with AI. I think the world is going to be filled with a lot of this kind of single prompt based, or what people would call AI slop type of content out there. And I do think in that world, when the 90% of the content is so-called slop, at the end of the day, what differentiates the content is the quality, the control, the genuine storytelling and creativity that you yourself are able to inject in as part of the process that will make it stand out. I think that's something that we deeply believe as a team in Comfy as well, and we've been seeing the trend where at the end of the day, no matter how much of this automated content that's dumped onto social medias and to all the consumption channel, at the end of the day, it's the small ones that actually take advantage of your own creativity that wins the rest of the eyeball ecosystem. And then the last thing on the advice for people is I would highly recommend everyone to break your assumption in what is possible, because AI is developing incredibly fast. I would push everyone to challenge any thoughts you had in terms of whether this type of visual result is possible, and push the boundary, because the entire world is actually witnessing the boundary being constantly pushed. So yeah, that's something I would leave for everyone else as well.
This is awesome. Hey, thank you guys so much. This is great. Let's give it up for Julie.